sometimes doubted, often dismissed. And then, quietly, without countdowns or flashy launches, a message begins circulating in engineering circles. Maxwell Chikumbutso's self-powered device is no longer locked behind closed doors. No dramatic press conference. No celebrity endorsements. Just confirmations, inquiries, and controlled access beginning to surface. And that's where this story truly begins. Because this isn't about a gadget hitting online marketplaces overnight. This is about a technology that has spent years under scrutiny, demonstrations, and internal validation, now transitioning into something far more consequential: real-world distribution. According to sources close to the project, the release isn't mass market. It's deliberate, structured, carefully managed. The reason is simple: this isn't a consumer toy. It's an energy system capable of operating independently of traditional power inputs. And once a system like that enters circulation, it can't be recalled. Early access appears to be focused on institutions, pilot programs, and strategic partners. Governments, industrial users, infrastructure developers. Not because everyday people are excluded, but because scale matters. A self-powered device deployed incorrectly doesn't just fail, it disrupts. Behind the scenes, interest has intensified. Requests are coming from regions facing unstable grids, high fuel costs, and energy insecurity. For them, this device isn't revolutionary, it's necessary. The appeal isn't unlimited power fantasies. It's reliability, continuity, independence. What makes this moment different from past claims is not marketing, it's behavior. No aggressive selling. No countdown timers. No buy now pressure. Instead, there are verification steps, technical briefings, and controlled demonstrations. That alone has caught the attention of engineers who were previously skeptical. So, how does someone actually get access? Not through ads. Not through influencers. But through direct engagement. Organizations are reportedly required to submit use case proposals. Location, scale, and application matter. This isn't about ownership, it's about deployment. And that signals something important. The technology is being positioned as infrastructure, not merchandise. Meanwhile, the debate hasn't stopped. Critics remain vocal. Supporters remain confident. But something undeniable has shifted. When a technology moves from talked about to selectively distributed, the conversation changes. Because now the question isn't does it exist? It's who gets it first, and why. As interest grows, so does silence from the developers. No rebuttals. No online arguments. Just progress. Just movement. Just systems quietly being put into place. And that may be the most telling sign of all. Because history shows us something very clear. When transformative technologies are real, they don't beg for belief. They proceed. Small pilot installations begin appearing, not announced, not branded, not live-streamed. A rural facility here, an industrial site there. In each case, the same pattern emerges: quiet deployment, monitored performance, long observation windows. No rush. No hype. Just data. Engineers involved in these early rollouts describe a shift in mindset. Instead of asking how much power the device produces, they ask how stable it is. How it behaves under load. How it responds to environmental changes. Because the real promise of a self-powered system isn't excess, it's consistency. And consistency is exactly what draws attention. Energy planners begin to notice something subtle but unsettling. These deployments don't require grid upgrades. They don't wait for permits tied to fuel logistics. They don't scale linearly with infrastructure spending. They simply operate. And once that realization sets in, the implications become impossible to ignore. For potential buyers, or more accurately, adopters, the process becomes clearer but no less selective. Conversations start with purpose, not price. What problem are you solving? What happens if the system succeeds? What dependencies disappear if it does? Because adopting a self-powered device isn't just a purchase. It's a decision to step outside existing energy frameworks. That's why access remains controlled. Not to create scarcity, but to prevent misuse. A technology that bypasses traditional energy inputs also bypasses traditional safeguards. The developers seem acutely aware of that. Every deployment is tracked, every outcome documented, every lesson fed back into the system's evolution. Meanwhile, demand continues to rise, not from consumers scrolling online, but from entities that understand long timelines. Utilities, transport hubs, remote operations, places where failure isn't an option and reliability is everything. Publicly, very little changes. No ads appear. No checkout pages go live. But privately, the network grows. Quietly, methodically, one deployment at a time. And perhaps that's the most important detail of all. If this device were imaginary, it would need noise to survive. If it were a scam, it would chase attention. Instead, it's doing the opposite. It's choosing where to exist. And as more systems come online, one truth becomes harder to deny. The market didn't demand this technology. Reality did. The question now isn't where to buy it, and planning offices. The discussion is no longer theoretical. It's operational. Timelines are being redrawn. Assumptions are being challenged. Energy experts start noticing a ripple effect. In areas where the device is piloted, backup generators remain unused. Fuel deliveries are delayed, then canceled. Maintenance schedules change. Entire layers of redundancy, once considered essential, suddenly look unnecessary. And when systems stop failing, people stop talking about them. Reliability has a way of erasing noise. What's especially striking is how the device reshapes decision-making. Projects that were once labeled too remote or too expensive to power are quietly revisited. Mining operations, research stations, agricultural hubs, places that never fit neatly into grid-based planning models now become viable again. And with that shift comes something even bigger: leverage. When energy is no longer a constraint, priorities change. Development accelerates. Independence grows. And dependence on fuel markets, unstable grids, or political bottlenecks begins to fade. That's not just an engineering outcome. That's a strategic one. Inside the development circle, refinement continues. Not reinvention, refinement. Software updates, efficiency tuning, environmental adaptations. Each deployment teaches the system something new, and those lessons are quietly absorbed into the next iteration. The device evolves, but never loudly. People looking from the outside still ask the same question: why isn't this everywhere? The answer, according to those closest to the project, is simple. Because technologies that change systems don't spread like apps. They spread like infrastructure, slowly at first, then all at once. And that moment, the shift from isolated deployments to undeniable presence, feels closer than ever. Requests are becoming harder to postpone. Regions once dismissed as future markets are demanding present solutions. And the developers now face a different challenge: not proving the device works, but deciding how fast the world should be allowed to change. Because once access opens wider, there's no returning to the old way. And that's the part no one can stop talking about. Not whether the device exists, not whether it works. As that realization spreads, another shift begins, subtle, but unmistakable. Conversations move away from acquisition and toward transition. Not how do we buy this, but how do we reorganize once this is in place? Because a self-powered device doesn't just plug into existing systems. It quietly exposes how fragile those systems always were. In regions where pilot deployments stabilize operations, something unexpected happens. Planning horizons expand. Projects that once required layers of contingency suddenly feel simpler. Budgets stretch further. Risk calculations soften. Energy, once the limiting factor in every proposal, becomes background noise. And when energy becomes predictable, control changes hands. That's why interest keeps coming from unexpected places. Not just energy sectors, but water management, transportation logistics, emergency response, and even data infrastructure. Anywhere continuity matters, this technology begins to appear, not as a headline, but as a solution. Inside the development ecosystem, the tone remains restrained. There's no rush to declare victory. No push to dominate markets. Instead, there's an almost cautious respect for what's unfolding. The people closest to the system understand something others are just beginning to grasp. Once this scales, it will quietly invalidate entire industries. Fuel supply chains, backup power markets, grid dependency models. All of them rest on one assumption, that energy must always come from somewhere else. This device challenges that assumption at its core. That's also why access remains structured. Not everyone is ready to redesign their world around a new energy reality. Some systems are too invested in the old one. Some institutions move too slowly. And some simply aren't prepared for the consequences of energy independence. Still, the pressure builds. Every successful deployment removes another excuse. Every month of uninterrupted operation weakens the argument against it. And every silent system running day and night without intervention makes the future feel less speculative and more inevitable. Observers begin to notice something else as well. There are no rollbacks. No pilot programs quietly shut down. No lessons learned press releases that signal failure. Once installed, the devices stay. They become invisible fixtures of daily operation, doing what they were designed to do. And invisibility, in technology, is the ultimate proof of success. Somewhere between skepticism and acceptance, the world finds itself adjusting. Not abruptly, not dramatically, but steadily, line by line, decision by decision. Because when a technology stops asking for permission, stops asking for belief, and simply continues to operate, but because resistance becomes impractical, systems that operate flawlessly leave little room for argument. Data replaces debate. Results replace rhetoric. Institutions that once demanded exhaustive proof now request timelines. Those that question feasibility now ask about scalability. The tone shifts from confrontation to negotiation, from dismissal to positioning. No one wants to be the last to adapt when the transition becomes unavoidable. In places where the device has been running longest, a quiet confidence takes hold. Operators stop checking dashboards obsessively. Engineers reduce manual oversight. The technology fades into the background, not because it's insignificant, but because it's dependable. And dependability over time reshapes trust. You can see it in the decisions being made next. Expansion plans no longer include fuel contingencies. Emergency protocols are rewritten. Budgets once reserved for power uncertainty are redirected toward growth. Energy, for the first time, stops being the dominant variable. And this is where the story deepens. Because the developers aren't standing still. While the world adjusts to what already exists, refinements continue behind the scenes. Efficiency curves tighten. Adaptability improves. Integration pathways become smoother. The system doesn't chase visibility, it matures. That maturation introduces a new dynamic: compatibility. How this technology coexists with existing infrastructure. How it complements, replaces, or quietly renders obsolete what came before. These are not marketing questions. They are structural ones. And the answers shape entire ecosystems. Outside observers may still be waiting for a defining moment, a launch, an announcement, a turning point they can label and remember. But inside the transformation, no such moment exists. There is only continuity. One system installed. One operation stabilized. One dependency removed. And with each step, the gap between those who adapt and those who hesitate grows wider. The device doesn't force change. It doesn't argue for relevance. It simply keeps working, patiently, persistently, while the world rearranges itself around that fact. And the longer it operates, the clearer one thing becomes. Organizations that waited now scramble to catch up. Systems built around assumptions of scarcity feel outdated overnight. Processes designed to manage uncertainty struggle in a world where continuity is the default. The shift doesn't happen with chaos, but with quiet urgency. Those who aligned early move forward smoothly. Their operations are stable. Their planning is confident. Their dependency is gone. Not because they were promised a miracle, but because they trusted performance over noise. The device itself remains unchanged in spirit. No slogans, no announcements, just uninterrupted operation. Day after day, month after month. Proof without persuasion. And that's when the truth settles in. This was never about selling a product. It was about introducing a new baseline. A world where energy is assumed, not chased. Where power doesn't dictate possibility. Where innovation isn't loud, but irreversible. Maxwell Chikumbutso's self-powered device doesn't demand belief. It doesn't